It's almost 2026.
It's almost 2026.
And guess what? We have a trend report for them. This is the webinar to go over the 2026 trend report from Trend Hunter.
I'm Armida Escano. I'm the Chief Content Officer.
And I'm Jonathan Brown, the Chief Growth Officer here.
Let's get into it.
How do you start the process of putting together a top trends report for a year?
Yeah, so the top trends report for the year, the process typically looks like looking at the trends that were highest rated over the past year, and then holding that up against where the demand has been most from clients. In addition, I will say, and this is like a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more of the human part of the process, it's looking for the big behavioral shifts that we've just observed, just as people who consume a lot of media and work in trends throughout the year. So what that looks like in a literal sense, I do the first pass with all of the tech stuff and then that kind of lens of judgment. And then I pass it over basically from level to level. So then it makes it to our SVP of content or VP of content. Then it goes down to the folks who are actually writing the macro trends for an additional check. And yeah, it's kind of a labor of love from the whole department.
What do you think about the effect of this being on people that consume this? With research, so much of it comes down to the building it with the intention of the audience in mind, and different research is good for different parts of processes and different times of the year. So where can people think about this fitting into that?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a couple of answers to that question. There's the way that the aspirational hope I have for how people use the top trend report of the year. And then there's one that's like a little bit more granular, I think. My hope is that people get this admittedly enormous trend report and use it to fuel more associative thinking. I think that it would be good and practical and likely the way most folks who are watching this use the report to flip specifically to the category that is most relevant to you and to your industry. But my hope and the aspirational kind of dream I have for how this report is used is for folks who are in tech to only spend time, looking over those trends quickly, but then spend a little bit more time on what they see in lifestyle and design, what they see in food and beverage. So, our hope with making it such a huge and broad spanning report is that people actually start looking for trends in places that seem unrelated to where they work.
That sounds like one good tip for digesting this is don't just run to the category that you work in. Purposely look at least one or two other categories within the report to expand your horizons, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the philosophy of how we approach trends at Trend Hunter, right? We like to cast a wide net when it comes to the sorts of trend information we want people to look at. And no industry lives in a vacuum, especially when we're talking about trends, right? I am of the thinking that it always starts with consumer behavioral shifts. You and I were talking recently about this, how I don't think that a product or service is predetermined to be successful, released into the world, and then people react to it. I think that there are things that happen where people's behavior and motivational shifts create the right environment for a product or service to succeed. And so that's how trends are born, right? People kind of already creating a world that's amenable to this specific thing, to this specific trend. And so when it comes to looking at trends and trying especially to be the originators of those trends, we can't just look in the industry we're trying to innovate in. We have to get a read of other things that people are drawn toward in the current day and age. That's kind of why it's so important to take that multifaceted approach.
Because your product or service doesn't exist in the eyes of the consumer in only the category that you believe you work in, right?
Exactly.
I remember once I spoke to somebody from a bank in South America who said they wanted trend reporting on customer service trends in banks in South America. And I said, but nobody goes into 5 banks in a day and says, this bank was number 1, the experience in this bank was number 5. You go to the dry cleaner, you go to the airport, you drop your kids off at school, you go to the bank, and you compare all of these experiences because that's your customer journey of a day, right?
Right.
So I found there's an interesting aha for them to say, oh yeah, we have to design in the environment that our consumers are going through.
That makes me think of a quote from one of our senior futurists, Gil. She's the SVP of Client Success, I believe. In one of her retail presentations from a few years back, she had a quote that was, people don't wake up in the morning and think, what am I going to buy today? They wake up in the morning and think, what am I going to do today? And that was kind of support for the idea that the retail experience needs to be exactly that, an experience. And obviously that goes beyond retail. Like whatever you're offering as a company, even if you are, trying to be as innovative in your category as possible, it's true. You're just one part of a person's kind of broader experience for the day.
How do you how do you push people to develop the associative thinking necessary to be able to look at other categories and understand what's happening in that world, how that matters to them?
I guess one question I like to ask that kind of shakes people out of that thinking is, do you know what your customer is doing when they're not interacting with you? And if they don't know the answer to that question, then, that leads them to a host of other questions, I hope. But if they do know the answer to that question, then that's great. You just start filling in those blanks and you get a more full picture.
Right, because then you start you can then map those things that, what do you imagine they're doing when they're not with you or engaging with your product? And then you can start to storyboard out, I'd imagine, okay, well, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. And that probably opens up your mental pathways to say, okay, well, then those are then places that I could go investigate, right? So what might be an example of that? If I'm Kellogg's and I'm a cereal, producer, snack cereal kind of thing. What are you thinking about when you're thinking about that kind of consumer for that kind of company? How could they start that thought process?
So, a lot of these companies, by the time they come to us, they already have a few of those answers, hopefully, right? You know who you're talking to. So maybe Kellogg's is developing a cereal for Gen Z students. So if they already know that much, then it's easier to fill in the blanks and do that storyboarding, right? Maybe this person woke up in the morning, and if we're honest, the first thing they do is reach for their phone and spend like 45 minutes on TikTok before they get out of bed. Maybe it's a different kind of student. Maybe they're more athletic and maybe they immediately get up, go take a shower. They're eating really fast so they can get to some sort of practice or whatever. But that, like, those options already, identifying those couple different options, I think is a step toward building that out. And you have a series of those choices that you can make as you have that conversation. Is it this kind of person or this kind of person that just kind of fleshes things out in a more, in a more vivid way?
Okay, so let's get into some of the content then. The report is broken down into different categories. So you have a food and beverage, you have tech, you have different pieces of it, right? We're not going to get into all of it, but let's go one by one and just pick a couple fun ones. So AI analog. I find this one really interesting because when you think about trends and whether I'm riding a wave and I'm trying to be early on riding that wave, or if I'm trying to actually identify that wave and be early on the tension, the divergent tension, right? So obviously AI, topic du jour, everybody's rushing towards AI, rightly so. But then there's this analog part to it that is the kind of divergent tension, right?
Right, yeah. So, we're all about trend tensions here. And I think that the most interesting developments in trends happen in the places where there's that push and pull. This is born from the idea that younger generations especially are really wary of how much power we're giving technology like AI, and the idea that living a life that is that fueled by technology could potentially provide some challenges socially and just kind of take the romance out of things. It's like a halfway point between the rise of dumb phones, which is funny because when I was their age, we just called those phones because they didn't have those capabilities yet. But you see Gen Z buying like old flip phones and like shout out the Razor phone. This is like the next level of that. So it's like a compromise, right? You will have an e-reader that also has AI capabilities so that you still have a hobby that allows you to sit there and read, but maybe has a little bit of AI. You have a watch that is still very finely crafted and and, it's Swiss and all the fancy things we know about watches and that early technology, but it has one AI capability. Maybe it tracks your steps, something simple like that. So this is a sort of compromise born out of that tension point of, I want to still have like an analog life that has that romance, but I still want that hyper convenience that AI gives.
I think that's really interesting thread to pull on. First of all, there's apps that you can download on your smartphone to limit the apps that you can access. So you can go, you go out for the night or whatever with your friends, let's say, or you're visiting with somebody you just want to focus on. You can turn it into dumb mode. And then all you can access is your pictures, your notes, your phone to call someone, but nothing else, right? Also, within this, there's an interesting shift happening where I feel like you may have, let's call it analog skins of products, but there's AI underneath, so it doesn't feel like a digital product. It feels like an analog product, but there's still digital elements that are beneath the surface that you're not actually engaging with, but they're just there. Right? And that sort of speaks to a lot of the discussion right now of, in the agentic era that we're moving into with AI, you will probably get to a place where humans are interacting with the internet directly in a different way because the agents are doing it, right? So if you have agents interacting, I was in a conversation with a roundtable of folks from different companies about communication innovation. And if you think of marketing a CPG product, let's say, what toilet paper or paper towel do you buy? And if the game to now has been, how do we appeal to our Meta and what matters to her and get this brand loyalty, but now your agent is buying those things.
It's AI optimization now.
Then you have to start to think about the biases of your AI now and how they market to that AI system that's going to make the choice about whether to get Cottonelle or something else.
Right. That kind of comes down to use of data instead of that sort of, I guess, lifestyle-driven branding that we've all come to know so well.
Do you have any analog items?
I have a lot of analog items. Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, if I didn't do this for a living, I would bring back my Razor flip phone in a heartbeat. I don't have too many. Actually, I guess I do have an e-reader. I have analog desires, but if I'm honest, I am living a pretty tech-driven life. And that kind of introduces this whole conversation and that question that you asked me, and my answer, which I've never actually thought to give before, brings to mind what people are willing to sacrifice in exchange for their data. Like, what makes it worth it, right? What makes it worth it to have us give up so much agency to AI and literally, engage with these super agents? For a lot of people, the answer is pretty simple, and it's convenience. But for a certain set of people, they feel that what they're giving up is a little more than that, and then you get things like AI analog.
Yeah, I mean, I think that vibe coding is an interesting one because of it represents the shift out of an expert-led AI era of a technician, an engineer, someone that can code, being the primary people in an organization that can influence AI usage. And when you have things like vibe coding, that's just one manifestation of that democratization, that like flattening out of the access to AI and creating things using AI. If you don't need to know the coding language to be able to execute and create things with code, then that really changes the landscape, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that vibe coding will always be one of my favorites because it's just like a perfect meta example of why this era of AI is so scary, but also so exciting, because it's a literal fact that you don't need to know how to code because AI will code for you to build something with AI. You get what I mean? Like, it's all of these layers of the same thing. And honestly, if it weren't for vibe coding, I probably wouldn't still have this role right now. I remember when, we've been developing AI products and services forever at Trend Hunter, but admittedly, when we started developing AI products and services 10 years ago, I was one of those people who was thinking, okay, that's not my problem until it reaches my desk. For now, that's up to dev, that's up to the tech team. But as we started ramping up and this sort of thing became more and more important, and you could no longer escape AI, especially when you work in trends, if it weren't for vibe coding, then I wouldn't have known how to create the kind of tools that make trend hunting in the AI era still relevant. So I owe a lot to this one.
And I think that this is representative of a shift that a lot of businesses are missing right now, in that by traditional logic, if you didn't know anything about what's happening and what has progressed in AI, and you said who should be responsible for governing and setting up how we use AI and infrastructures around that in our company, you would probably land with
your tech people.
100%. IT, those for sure, right? Your chief technology officer, these would be the places that you would think about top down driving that strategy. The challenge with that I see is that while well-intentioned, while very educated, while understanding, their role in ensuring security and these different elements that are important to IT, they can't possibly know the ins and outs, the nuances of every role,
right,
and how they could be using AI. So from this top-down view, they're missing all of these applications of AI because they're designing at a generalist scale of what are the tools that we will approve for everyone to use, as opposed to what is the pain point in the operations department, in the supply chain, in the sales that could be fixed with the right tools.
Right.
And so why I bring that up is because this kind of vibe coding is a signal of this democratization. And then when you go back to that organizational choice of who leads the way, IT can still lead the way, but not without the input of the different players in different roles, or else they'll just always play at this higher level, and you'll miss all of the value within the role's nuances.
I like what you're saying there as well, because it sort of positions vibe coding as a way for, if you're watching this right now and you're a person who has ever looked at your department and thought that could be done better, I wish I knew how to do it, then this is for you. This is a way for you to maximize on critical thinking skills that you probably already have, but you haven't been able to execute on just yet. So I like taking it from that approach, instead of just thinking about what this means for the overall trend and development of people's relationship with AI, which is usually where I come from. It's this idea of unlocking new skill sets, I guess, and kind of maximizing talents we all already have, but we're not using.
AI Mundane talks about automating simple day-to-day tasks. I think that this is an interesting one to just talk about the difference between automation and agents.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I think that those things are used very incorrectly interchangeably.
Yeah.
Simplest way that I've seen it laid out as the difference is that automation can follow steps that are pre-laid out, that just follow a normal logic of this gets inputted, this transfers here, this gets filled out here, it produces this report, it gets sent out. These steps that are in sequence, whereas an agent is connected to all of these different tools and is discerning which to use to get the job done.
Right.
So maybe to boil that down even further, the automation is focused on the means and the agent is focused on the end and will decide the means to get to that end.
Yeah, I think it's that the agent has more discernment, has more decision-making power, I guess, which I would think of this from the user perspective as how much work is required from me with automation versus with an agent. And with an agent, it is just the end result, as you were saying. With automation, it's how you want me to get there, what you want and how you want me to get there. Which I think it's interesting to me how quickly we've switched from one to the other. And I think that pace is partially why we haven't gotten 100% clear on the difference between automation and agents just yet. This particular trend, AI Mundane, starts with that idea that it's especially our generation who remembers what life was like before everything was so technical, but kind of grew into our own successes and our own milestones with this technology as an aid. We're kind of teetering in the balance of wanting to grant it that much power so that we can continue to live, these really hyper convenient lives, versus, the yearning for an older way of doing things. Like when you asked if I have anything analog, I was like, yeah, I have a lot of things analog, because to me, that's still the way I want things to be. I like to say that millennials in particular don't want AI to become more human. We want AI to move faster so that we can become more human. We want to be able to, lean into the parts of our lives that are tech free by being able to offload more things to technology that we don't actually like doing. There's a tweet that went viral, and I wish I remembered the name of the person who tweeted it. I do not. That was like, they've got it wrong. I don't want AI to write books so that I can do more laundry. I want AI to do my laundry so I can write more books, just as an example of what you would automate versus what you would enhance. And I think that now that we're in the agentic era, although it feels like agents are more human and that it could be counterintuitive to what I'm describing, the more it can take over and the faster that process is, the less screen time we actually have to engage in. Like the act of using this technology doesn't require us to sit in front of our phones for hours. It's actually, 10 seconds of typing out a prompt and then you let it be. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, separate point, but I can't wait until these things, I don't have to worry about carrying them around anymore, and it's some better solution.
So skin scent, I wanted to include, you talked a little bit about backlashes, right? And this idea that do you want to join in on a trend when we're at the tension point, and that signifies, the next iteration of it. I think that every trend that shows more of that customization, that personalization, especially when it crosses over from consumer preference to like biological customization, is a backlash to the automation and the AI of it all. So if we're seeing a demand for fragrances that react to my specific skincare chemistry, my specific skin chemistry, then that is not disconnected from the idea that we're getting, some would say, less human with the rise of the super agent era.
Numbing burger.
Oh,
nub.
Numbing burger.
Oh, I thought you said nubbing burger. I said numbing, and
I think I said nubbing.
Nubbing.
It's numbing. No, they're Szechuan peppercorns. Do you know what a Szechuan peppercorn is?
I guess I don't.
Szechuan peppercorn. Am I going to be on the? For those who are watching, a Szechuan peppercorn. Szechuan peppercorn is it's a spice. It's like a Chinese spice. You've probably had it before. That has that physical reaction of numbing your mouth. We have a lot of clients in the food and beverage space. We are always on the lookout for the next big ingredient. Like we've seen it time and time again, right? You remember when like everything had avocado in it? Mm-hmm. Everything had bacon in it. That was like 2012. Obviously, there's the next pumpkin spice latte, whatever that'll be. Mm-hmm. I think, though, that like foodie culture is in an interesting space. There are all of these offshoots of what type of person who loves food you are, right? Like there's like a larger category of people who love food. And then underneath it, you have people who love food for the adventure it gives you. You have people who love food because it positions them as like worldly. You have all of these different things. I think numbing burger is interesting because it's more about that idea that food can be an adventure, and that you want these sort of experiences that cross over from just eating the food, and even just like a nice dining experience into something that's more fun to talk to other people about. Mm-hmm. I think they already have some numbing burger type things offered at like a Shake Shack, so I expect to see more of these at larger QSRs. So up next, I included this kind of 1-2 punch of camp coffee and revitalized picnic. Part of the thinking with that is this was an example of a trend that came up, I'm going to say the P word, don't be scared, during the pandemic, that originally was born out of necessity, that is now just something people like to do for fun. It also ties into that kind of rise of analog lifestyle that we talked about earlier, It's all this to say people are outside again, which I think is really nice. Camp Coffee and Revitalized Picnic are both examples of people wanting to bring the luxuries of home into the outdoor space. I'm sure that your wife has asked you for like a picnic date, which men, if anybody watching this, if your partner has asked you to take them on a picnic, it is a very cheap and enjoyable date. So you should 100% do it, and deeply on trend. I think a lot of the trends that came up during the pandemic out of necessity have wound up having legs because it's just become consumer preference. And yeah, spending time outside and reconnecting with nature, even if it's in small doses, and you still get to retain your love of like very fancy single origin Ethiopian coffee or whatever, is something that we're going to keep seeing.
Thanks a lot for joining us. This is the 2026 Trend Report webinar. Final words, parting shots.
Remember to build up that associative thinking, and every trend is a human trend, even if it is a tech trend.
Mic drop.